Hey, Kiwi. I see you, Dr. Joe. All right, we're going to bring Dr. Joe on now. This ought to be very interesting. Dr. Joe Lightheart. These shows resonate with you. Please share. We would appreciate it so we can stay above the algorithms at Facebook. We're now going to wait on Dr. Joe to figure out the technology so he can join us on screen.
I can hear you, you know.
I know you can.
Oh.
Well, I'm glad I wore red. I was going to take this shirt off, but now I know why. Now I know why I didn't.
Well, it's like me and my shadow, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. You're alternate personality. Okay.
No, I've become non-binary overnight.
You have.
Yes, I'm now a unified field, all of my own. Todd, I've brought you the Christmas present, mate.
Let me see. Hang on. What is it?
It's a pair of undergarments.
They're see-through. They're see-through. Can you please get those to me before Christmas Day?
Yeah, well, I've got a present to go in them, something that you've been praying for a long time.
What is it?
Does that make you feel more conscious? Courageous? You've been asking for a pair, haven't you, mate? Here they are.
Yes, thank you. I need those. Please get them to me as quick as possible. I'll try not to crush them.
Listen, we've got to be serious tonight, apparently.
I agree.
Because Seanin, because that's their new name now, Seanin Blonde, you know, there's a bit of French in there, right, and a bit of Celtic. She's told me to behave myself and to be serious coming up to 2020.
Well, does that go for her too?
Oh, absolutely. She's my rock, my fortress. Lilith comes to mind.
Oh my gosh. You look very good today. You look to be in good spirits. The last couple of times I've seen you, you've been in good spirits, but you've been doing the work.
I have, mate,
yeah, subjected to all the stuff that's been coming in. Where do you stand with everything now?
The academic term finished today for a couple of weeks. My lovely wife and myself and the cat were having a week away in the Highlands of Scotland, as I mentioned to you before. We're 40 minutes away from the battlefield of Culloden.
Culloden? Aye.
Yeah, aye. Sassenach, aye. So we're going to have a look around there because my great-grandfather comes from that area. James Dunbar, his name was.
James
Dunbar. So
Dunbar.
we're going to sort of dig up some roots and see what's going on. But, you know, I've watched on a few occasions now Outlander all the way through, like you have, and it was on your sort of recommendation, really. And my wife and I both love it. We can't wait for the next and final part of it, really.
Yeah.
Which apparently comes out in the new year.
Yeah. I think it comes out in February.
February.
I'm waiting on pins and needles. So are you going to go to, you know, to be honest with you, I didn't know, I thought about it. I didn't know that Culloden was even an actual event.
Yeah. The Battle of Culloden's quite well known over in Scotland and stuff like that. And quite a lot of the information on Outlander is historically quite correct, really, obviously with a bit of sort of poetic license.
Yeah.
But you know, I can identify with the storyline running through the theme. You know, it's that timeline and multiple dimension connection that we've talked about before. You know, I've had those feelings all of my life, where I've sort of gone to places and picked up ancient sort of resonances from the past and things, but also I have sort of future sort of visionary sort of things that come to me as well. You know. And,
so are you there? Are you there now? Are you at your house?
No, we're at our new house at the moment. Yeah. Just packing the bags and getting ready. We're going first thing Saturday morning.
I missed that. So you actually are moving. I remember you said you had to move. I didn't realize. So you're moving to Scotland.
No.
Oh, it's
we're
not
just going to Scotland for a holiday. We've moved house from the, you know, we in July, the place we were living at, the landlord just said to us, I don't want to be a landlord anymore. I'm selling up, so you'll have to get out, you know. So the old Joe came back, the grip in the gut, the immediate fear of the future, you know, all those things that I used to have, the anxiety, the worry, the concern. The old Joe, he's always hanging there like some sort of a shadow on my shoulder, you know. And people have said, well, that's your ego. You still must be full of ego. Yes, I am, Todd. I'm absolutely and utterly full to the brim with ego, you know, and I don't care, mate. And sometimes I find it hard to discern or distinguish between what's my ego that's driving me and what's my spirit or my soul that's driving me. I don't know, mate. You know, I'm still rough and I need a lot of refinements, but you know, I'm not bothered about it anymore. I'm not trying to work anything out. Every morning I wake up, I hand over my heart and my will and my life to the care of the universe, and I say, what are we doing today? Give us a clue. If you need my help, God, right, give us a shout. Other than that, I'm going to try and enjoy myself to the best of my ability. And that's what I do, mate. And if that's surrender, then that's what I do, you know. But surrendering to me, surrender to win, it means, Joe, stop trying to analyze, stop trying to predict, stop trying to work out everything that's going on, because it's far too complicated for your tiny little mind to get hold of. I've got you now because I said I would. I'm caring for you, even though you don't think so. I really am, because just look back over the last 12 months, how you were in the shift, right? And how you were worried about how things were going to work out. Look back, Joe, and see, have they worked out? And the answer is, Todd, they've worked out perfectly well.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, isn't that the ultimate form of surrender? Is that we do have this conception, or this rationalization, or whatever you want to call it, or this expectation, or this desire, or this wish, and we hold on to it, and we fight to hold on to it, and we have to be right, and you know, which means we have to prove somebody else wrong. But then the ultimate surrender is just let go, because what's in store for us is something far greater than we could ever imagine, and it's going to happen in some way that we can't even fathom.
I agree, and in my own personal lived experience, and that's really all I can talk from, you know, is, and really that's clouded by my own sort of perception of what's gone on in my life, you know. So there may be all sorts of areas that I'm blind to, but when I handed over my willpower and my life over to the care of God, as I call it, you know, my life changed completely. And I believe that what happened then was I let go of my ego self for my soul self, which is the bigger me, to come through, right, and to start to guide the process and show me how it's done properly, you know. And I think what's happening now is I've been guided through to grow up. Todd, it's basically about growing up. And by growing up, I don't mean becoming responsible and miserable and serious. I don't mean all that bollocks, right? What I mean is that we start to have all the ego structures that we've created for our own defense and protection and to try and get our own way like a spoiled little kid, all those are being washed away from us. And as they're washed away, our consciousness expands, our soul starts to move in a bit more, right? We become more empowered, we gain more self-confidence, more self-worth. But this is not about self-reliance, because
No.
self-reliance means using another sort of cognitive analytical technique to try and get your own way. This is about surrendering the little self and letting the big self come in and have its way. You know, I don't know whether that makes sense, but I think that it's just that we set this up at the level of the soul before we came here. That's my feeling about it.
Absolutely.
It's a bit like being on the holodeck of Starship, what that program's called, Enterprise, on the Starship
Star Trek.
Enterprise.
Yeah.
And sort of picking what you want to be this time, Joe, or pressing the button. I think I'll do that alcoholic trip. That looks interesting. And you press it, and then you're in it. You're in it. And it's got programs and subroutines and all that. And there's always a guide behind you. He said you shouldn't have bloody picked it. I told you it was a hard one. But now you're here. You can't get out until you've completed the mission. And the mission is, son, find your joy of living, find what works for you, stop moaning about it because you picked it, and try and enjoy the best of life to the best of your ability. And Todd, I believe that wholeheartedly. That's my way of trying to explain it, and it seems to be working,
Yeah. I know you pull in a lot. I know you pull in a lot of stuff, multidimensional aspects, universal, whatever you want to call it. I'm a little curious as to what have you been pulling in for the last 10 or 12 days, the last couple of weeks? I mean, even this month. I mean, what have you been pulling in?
It's the dragon, mate. It's the dragon stuff. And what I hear is, I don't want to be influenced by the collective consciousness anymore, or the collective unconscious. So I hear things and then I clear my mind then. And then I wait for these things to emerge rather than me generating things with my ego mind and creating the pictures and making it happen that way. Because I believe that that's what sentimentality is, that we can bring pictures in and imagine things, and that actually determines our mood state. I think in order to hear and feel what the soul is bringing to us, we have to clear our mind, by certain breathing techniques, and then we wait till something emerges then. I think that's the difference between imagination and visioning. I think that there's a different thing. The visioning or the vision, the visioning comes from the depths and is presented to us not by our tiny mind, but by our soul mind and our big
pops
mind.
in. It just pops in.
It pops in, and we can't control that. It pops in when you least expect it. You see,
This just happened to me. We have this young man that's been coming on for the last 3 weeks, Joshua Pearson. And I asked him, how do you travel in the universe? Because he was just talking about when he astrals, he goes inside himself. So I was just trying to get, some expansion out of it. So how do you do this? And he talks about how he goes into a part of the body where he's most resonant at the moment, and he finds a door and opens it, goes into the door and begins creating. So I tried it and I couldn't do it. I got to the door and I'm like, okay, well, but then like 48 hours later, I'm just sitting there and all of a sudden, boom, it just popped in. It wasn't me going into the body. It wasn't me looking for a door. I just found myself in this place and I knew I'd walk through this door that I had sought, right? But I didn't, make that happen. And I've always struggled with that because I can go into a meditation and I can go to this, I used to do one all the time and I would go and it's effective. I would go in, I'd go to this beach, I'd go sit down, and then I have a conversation with an ascended master, whatever the case may be. But it's when those things just pop in, which has become more frequent for me. It's become a lot more frequent for me over the last few months, is where they just pop in and take over. And you're just basically viewing it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what inspiration is. And I think inspiration means to breathe in as well. Can you be inspired when you're breathing out? These are the sort of questions. Expire means to breathe out, and inspire means to breathe in. So it's intricately connected to the way that we breathe. And we've talked about this before. I show people, based upon my experience, how to use their breathing and a positive emotional state with open-heartedness. That's the bit that takes them deeper, in my view, into their psyche, you know, and where all the, but the thing about it is, what I've realized is, as we go deeper, we start to dig and drill in to all the shit that's been covering our real essential selves. And it's almost like we have to go back through our own personal unconscious. And when we've cleared that out, then we start getting into our generational unconscious then. And all the other feelings that are associated with these repressed emotions start to emerge. So if you don't know how to regulate your breathing and accept the emotion and just observe it and let it transform itself, then it can take you away again, drive you crazy. That's why all these people who are forcefully trying to get Kundalini awakenings and stuff like that, or using maybe ayahuasca and all these things, yeah, it can give you a glimpse of these things, but if not guided properly, it can cause you to become absolutely crazy, you know. Todd, how do I know? Because that's where I was for about 20 years of my life.
I agree.
Know, and I went through a
lot of baby oil searching for the Kundalini.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it all depends on which finger you use, you know. Yeah, this one's handy.
You didn't say that. I know you didn't say that.
No, you've misunderstood what I've said. You've misperceived that based upon some sort of corrupted program that you've got in you, right? But you see, there's that one, you know, and then there's them two, you know.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's, you know, all this stuff, and that wonderful young woman Z, I don't know the rest of her name, the girl, the Chinese girl, you know, she was talking about how sex, as you know, the use of sex and the root chakra stuff, sex and power have been misdirected and perverted through fear, through misunderstanding, you know. And I was brought up in a very, very strict Irish Catholic environment, Roman Catholic environment, you know, where even the mention of the name was a sin. And before I was 7 years of old, I knew that anything to do with that word, right, I would go to hell immediately. So from a very, very early age, any feelings that came up of that nature, which were trying to naturally express themselves, I swallowed them down, pushed them into some sort of part of my psyche, right, and hid them away. But because that's what I thought was the correct thing to do. And all the energy that was associated naturally with that was misdirected, perverted, and everything else. And when in adolescence, when I found the drink and all that sort of stuff, it came back online in a massive, massive way. And it made me feel free and powerful at the same time. So I think that's what the addiction was. It was all as a consequence of repressed and suppressed emotion, because I was brought up to respect other people, respect authority, respect me elders, you know. Todd, it was a mess, mate, you know. And there are many, many unscrupulous organizations across the planet. This is just me talking now, who've known about that. And they've basically, they've kept naive people down, away from their true power, because it was easier to manipulate people who were living on their wits all the time and on their toes, you know. So,
well, they don't call it the root for one, you know, there's more than one meaning to that. And it's like the trunk of a tree, you know. And I'm not speaking of anatomy, I'm speaking of the chakra system. And obviously, if all the chakra shadow work we've all done, where was the hardest part? The hardest, you know, layers to remove were in the root, which is the base of our, you know, the base root, the base chakra, the root of our sexual power. And we know we're not talking about the 3D distorted sex. We're talking about sacred sexuality here. Yeah. And you're right. Everything was designed ultimately, you know, strategically to suppress that. I went through the same thing. I remember having, you know, discovering in my teenage years and having 3 relationships through about 16, 17 years old, and realizing one day after, you know, breaking up with these 3 different girls, you know, during my high school years, that I wasn't, that I thought, why is this happening? Why am I, you know, getting 6 months, 9 months, a year into a relationship and then becoming bored, you know, moving on. And I realized I was, at least that's where I was at. I was in love with the sex. You know, it wasn't the person, it was the sex. And then I started damning myself, went celibate, started damning myself, and actually prayed to the God that I had been conditioned to believe in through the Roman Catholic and the other Western religious, churches or whatever that I went to. And I actually energetically manifested all kinds of stuff, as a result of that. That's a long time ago, and it took a long time to deprogram all that stuff.
And there's so much power involved, isn't there? This is the whole point of it. Is Z was going on about she calls it the lightning penis and stuff like that, but that to me is the rod. And when used correctly, if you can get it past your sacral chakra, then it re-enlivens the whole spine then. So it moves up through the solar plexus, and used in a balanced way. We go through these energies, Jing, which is like basically ancestral power and sexual energy, creative force, if you like. We get to that. When we come to terms with that, that can be transformed then to take the person then and ascend. It's not really ascension. It's more like I've said to you before, it's detoxification.
Yeah.
And sort of, it's a cleansing process. But if you don't get past your sacral chakra and, it keeps sort of expressing itself in that region, then you're always trapped in that three dimension.
That's
and you
right.
can never really fully go inwards to explore who you truly are, So we have those three dantians or three centers, Jing, Qi, and Shen. And it's only really through Qi and through the heart and moving into different dimensions at the level of the fourth dimension and further on that we can get balance, so that the top information comes in, the bottom information comes in. So we've got Mother Earth and the creative force coming up. We've got Father God coming down. They meet in the heart. That's the mystical union when the golden child is born. And that's where I'm up to now. But the heart is like the cauldron. Initially, very, very emotional. And if you don't know how to breathe properly and allow yourself to mindfully take a step back and allow all these things to transform, then you'll be off again into your old habits. It's Todd, there is a responsibility that goes with this stuff.
Absolutely.
And I know that now. And when I say responsible, as I say, if you can be lighthearted about it and see all this as a great big cosmic joke, if you can have that sort of attitude, then things become easier to get through stuff then, And as I say, this is just my way of explaining it, mate, and I feel great in myself now. As you know, I'm coming up to 65 years of age. I feel like a 33-year-old, I've still got the thoughts of a 33-year-old, and which get me into trouble a lot, but hey, I'm okay with me, and that's where I'm up to. At the beginning of the day, my intention is to be kind, considerate, compassionate, helpful, right, and light-hearted.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, whether I've done my best or not, because I'm always doing my best, that's good enough for me.
Yeah. So whether we're talking about that or talking about the root chakra and what you were referring to earlier, there is a deprogramming and then a reprogramming. You cannot reprogram without the deprogram, because you're basically, what do they call it? Spiritual bypassing. I mean, you're bypassing. We have to deprogram in order to reprogram. And the other side of, and really, I think, which is the energetic, representation of what we're actually doing. Everything we're doing, we've done. The only thing we haven't done is expand creation from a neutral point. That neutral point being that divine marriage you're talking about. And so that's the way I see it. It was funny because we were talking to my brother over here a week or 10 days ago. We were talking about sacred sexuality, and he made the comment, and I don't remember the exact part of the conversation that happened, but at one point he looked at us and he said, I can tell you one thing. There are many things that have come true that I have put forth in sacred intimacy. That actually, so there is something to be said for the intentions and the desires, and I mean that at a higher level, put forward in that energy field, which obviously can happen within ourselves, but we're in a situation now with this cosmic duality where we're actually able to do this with another person. And yeah, the procreation is a physical representation of the energy that I'm talking about, but we're actually producing that golden child. And that's a core moment. That is that space that you're talking about, that heart space, that cauldron, where all the magic comes from, where creation's expanded, you know?
Yeah, and I think, you know, the root chakra to me is associated with the adrenal glands first and foremost. That's survival instinct. Then the sacral chakra, the sex hormones and the gonads and things. Those two together, sex and power. You know, Frankie Goes to Hollywood said this in a song, sex and power became the new gods, you know. And he also did the power of love as well at the same time. So there was relax, don't do it if you want to get to it. And then the power of love as well, you know. And they're very significant, really, those songs, you know,
Yeah.
because where I'm up to now is, you know, from a unified point of view, I feel totally sort of androgynous. You know, I feel that there's a balance within me of the masculine and the feminine. You know, I've said to you before that I call myself gay from the waist up, you know, because my bottom bits are biologically male and my top bits seem feminine, you know, and stuff like that. No, honestly, and you know, I'm very, very sensitive, you know, in the top half, you know. It depends. This is where I'm up to. But I don't think, you know, where I'm up to is it's almost as if through breathing, you almost have to take the wand and suck it up and allow it to come inwards as well within the individual, you know. And I think some people will understand that you don't need anybody else outside you, because the mystical union happens within you, you know. And you know, and that's the whole thing is. And the heart is really the moderator, the mediator, and basically in charge of the whole process, you know. But if you don't get the heart involved, you're just whizzing back and forward from root to head, and that's what drives you mad, you know, and stuff like that. That's my personal lived experience.
No, I get you. I'm just trying to follow your double entendres.
I don't do that, Todd. I don't understand what that means. I can't speak French.
So I had a really good question for you. I can't remember what it is now.
I don't know. The phrase "suck it up" seems to come to mind for some reason.
That wasn't anything like I was thinking.
No.
What the hell were you talking about? Oh my God. Oh, yeah. Again, I think that we have, all of us, and maybe it's totally understandable. I guess it is. We have totally underestimated the power of one unique and equal soul. We have set the bar so high because we've come from this distortion so low that we've actually really done yeoman's work. We've done a hell of a job in terms of our internal balance. And then, of course, we're afforded the opportunity now to take this and create this same field and even expand it with a mirror of ourselves, whether that be a romantic relationship, if you want to call it that, or whether that be a relationship with someone else. Obviously, it's going to go from one person to one person, two, and then the math is going to start to change as we bring in groups. But this is where it's at. It's like that internal work that we've done, that we've underestimated our progress, is starting to take hold in physical matter. And that means to me that not only are we going to create energetic golden children, we're going to create physical manifestations or physical representations of that energy, which doesn't have to be a birth of a physical baby. It can be the birth of many, many other things, you know.
I think it's a birth of ideas, mate. It's the forefront of the new world, you know. And we don't know what it's going to be like until we work it out ourselves, you know. To me, it's all about movement as well, taking action, right, based upon inspiration and intuition and stuff like that. I mean, what was I going to say before? What you said before, I see it slightly in a different way. I think we have to become deprogrammed, not to get reprogrammed. I think because what we're doing is we're actually shedding all the crap away to become our essential selves, which has been there in all the time. So I think that once we've got the clean, essential self that's just living from itself and creating from itself, I don't think there's any more conditioning or program. This is what I would call biology beyond belief, because we've come away from memory, both short and long-term memory. We've discarded it, and we're just living from this conscious awareness and this ever-flowing, basically unconditional love, you know. And, you know, Todd, I feel that most of the time. I'm not completely freed from the human ego, but most of the time I've got this purring, sort of gentle flowing feeling up. You know, I get that sort of sweet tasting nectar type thing in my mouth. And apparently these are good signs, you know. And I could be barking up the wrong tree here, you know, or I could be, as I say often, back to the psychiatric department in no time, but I feel really, really good about it. I was in a meeting today. I was in a training session today. I was bored shitless, honestly, because basically, you know, it's a sort of whole load of academics who were arguing about the nuance and the differences between different words and how we can apply this, that, and the other, you know. And I just can't take it seriously anymore, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to get students, right, to act in a certain way to become more refined robots at the end of it, right?
Yeah. Less work for the programmers.
Well, exactly, and it's so subtle, and so honest to God, they are good. They are good at it until you're standing away from it, right, and seeing the manipulations and everything else, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, I was caught in that trap for a long time. I was caught in the trying to be like them and modeling myself on them and behaving like them. No wonder, and I felt crap all the time, you know. But I see now that there's two ways to do it. There's authenticity, or as we call it, raw authenticity. That's the unconditioned, unprogrammed self versus the synthetic self, the synth, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, still, the majority of the world, right, seems to be in synthetic mode and pretentiousness, right? And unfortunately, again, it seems as though people have to go through quite serious traumatic events before something wakes them up, because that's what happened to me. That's what happened to you. It would be lovely if something I said or you said could prevent them from 10 to 15 years of suffering, if they could just get it, you know. And part of my mission is to try and grow in understanding of an effectiveness of carrying the message. And the message is, if you want to know what the truth is, listen deep in there. Listen really deeply. How do you do that then, Joe? Just breathe in this way, because that's what I was shown. Try and lighten up a bit and try and sink deeper and ask for help and guidance. Yeah. And that's the bit I couldn't do for a long time, Todd. Ask for help and guidance. Well, what do you mean? I'm only asking me body. No, just do us a favor. Just try it.
Give it a chance.
You know what, Todd? I nearly had to die before I turned to my heart and said, will you help me, please? And as soon as I said it, my life transformed like that.
There's two things, and I think that's exactly how the equation works. It's just give it a chance. But there's two things that you mentioned I want to touch on. One is I'm very close to you, what you said about the deprogramming and reprogramming. Again, this is only my opinion. I don't think that's why I never really cared for The Secret, you know, because it's just about programming. You can't, and of course I've had the luxury of working with a shadow worker, a shadow eater, you know, in my relationship, that showed me the importance of what you talked about, which was removing all that stuff to get back to the natural nature, right?
Yeah.
But my personal belief is, and this is not to put this on anybody, it's just what I don't believe we're here just to get to that point. You know, they talked a lot about in the early years of my awakening, they talked about returning to the original blueprint. Well, I think that's waking up. Waking up is getting back to that natural nature. And I think we're afforded the opportunity, or earned the opportunity, or chosen to have the opportunity to actually expand creation and create new blueprints, new templates based on our whole experience plus everything that we brought in. So I'm very close to you on that. Maybe we're saying the same thing. The other thing that I think that you bring up that's really important is that every one of us is guilty of saying those people aren't awake, or most of the people aren't getting this. This is a quantum reality now. And if we can just get rid of that focus, get rid of that notion, and again, this is my opinion, and we can just focus on ourselves, we might come to the realization that when we elevate, everything around us elevates. So we're actually the obstacle to them growing by creating the obstacle in their growth, right? I mean, we're actually judging that. So when we judge that, it is, right? Quantum, quantum mechanics. So if we just go, like you've said so many times and so many people have, go inward, and what does that mean? Just, worry about yourself, handle your own shift. And when you do that, these things will change out there. That's how powerful we are. How large is our energy field? It's much, much bigger than we think,
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We set the scene, or the higher power, higher self, soul. It sets the scene every day. This is what the secret to me is, that it sets the scene, right? The people, the players, the environment, the situation. It sets the scene for us to realize what more to let go of, right? And I think that the grip in the gut, the little sort of tension, it's a little sign to say stop. What's that about, right? You don't consciously know, but you felt the feeling. So there's some unconscious perception of threat there, Joe. It's showing these deep, repressed, hidden pockets of resistance, right? So welcome the disturbance, stop, take a step back, tune into the higher guidance or your deeper guidance and say, please show me what you want me to see from this here. And when you see it, Todd, and you can accept it, right, then it dissipates. The energy that's kept it down for eons of time goes back into your system. You get filled with more power, more courage, more energy, more creativity to go forward to the next, not test as such or lesson, but the next experience, right? And I think that me personally, I'm here now to experience in this lifetime and this body. I'm here to experience those experiences, those human experiences that I haven't completely fulfilled in previous lifetimes as well, or at the same time in a different dimension or that, So to me, the soul needs my body to be able to, for its own progress, because it feels progress through my feelings. So I'm as important in an ego sense, right, as the soul is as well, because it needs me just as much as I need it. So if we can work in a collaboration, right, then things go much more smoothly. And I do talk to my soul in that way. Hey, don't be at it now, right? Show us this in a different way. And, so I have a sort of friendly relationship. I've shared this with you before, but, someone once said to me, God is the Almighty, not old matey. And I see it exactly the opposite way around. God to me is old matey. It's not almighty, because I was brought up and it's the Almighty. You can't talk to the Almighty like that. Well, bollocks, mate, I'll talk to the Almighty like my best mate, And if the Almighty is in the sort of the symbolic form of Jesus, well, Jesus is my elder brother. I'll say to him, Jesus, if you're not busy, get down here, will you, and give us a shout, because I'm in trouble. I wonder if you could possibly help me, unless you can't be bothered, right? And that's the way I talk to spirit and talk to these entities, And people have said to me as well, which planet do you originate from? I don't originate from any planet. I originate from source itself, because I am and my father are one. And that means that I am source, but just in a mini Joe's version, And all these aspects, all these extraterrestrials and angels and things, I do see those as aspects of my overall consciousness. And I can ask each one of them to come in and help me through difficult times. It's like a whole compendium, right, of helpfulness, if you can tune into it and get sort of attuned to it in the correct manner. I'm talking shite here, mate. It's just coming out, but I sort of feel like I understand what I'm saying.
No, I'm with you on it. Alinka Sandhu, our beloved sister, she's always got some good comments. She came on a open mic one night. She mentioned a couple of things. Asking the question, how do you deprogram? There's a lot of ways to do that. Shanine mentioned Morgan's method. Shanine's been working with that. I don't know, what is that? To me, is that the more I get into this thing, it's about not differentiating ourselves from anything. Unity is unity, oneness is oneness, and anything that we think we're not or couldn't be, maybe that's where the line of separation is. I don't know. There's a lot of this seems to be a topic that's coming more and more to the forefront. How do we get into the mechanics of deprogramming, of neutralizing, of integrating, or whatever words you want to use? And the other thing that she brought up was Emanuel Swedenborg, who was a very prolific soul during the Renaissance, who was a big influence on me in my early development. And she mentioned you might want to research him. That's a really powerful book of work that he put together. But no, I totally agree with you. I think that in terms of like how we communicate, you say I would communicate with him like he's my brother or my mate. To me, I communicate with the universe like I communicate with myself. I always wondered why when I got a little bit emotional and graphic in my words with the universe, why it always spoke the same way back to me, and why I always got results. And I'm not saying that works for everybody. I'm just saying that I hit some point of where emotion aligned with passion and truth and love and being the human in this conditioned form. That's the best I could do at that point. I don't do the same things I did a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, because to your description, I'm growing up.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's helped me is I was in so much pain. I tried to do myself in a couple of times, and it should have succeeded, but part of the mission was go through hell, Joe, get to the gates of insanity and death, and then we're going to turn you around again, and we're going to show you how to do it naturally, And I love ancient Egyptology, and the weighing of the heart against the feather of truth and all that sort of business. And to me, the underlying symbology of that is work with what works for you. Don't let anybody else tell you how to be. You go inside. That's the only way you're going to find out. Go inside and feel where your strength is. It's called a strength-based approach, because in the West, we work with what's called a deficit-based approach, where we focused on what's not working, and we spend all of our life unnaturally trying to grit our teeth and become better at stuff that we're not naturally inclined towards. It's pointless. That's how they've sort of misdirected us, through our own stupidity. So if you go in and you find out what really blows your frock up, what really gives you enthusiasm and vitality, that's a little clue that that's essentially you. And you don't have to practice that. You don't have to learn it, because it's innately who you really are. That's what your soul's resonance is, your soul's vibration. So if you work from that there and align life with that, then you'll be much more successful, And there'll be other people who can do things that you can't do. Let them do that, because that's their strengths. And what happens then is Todd's good at one thing, Joe's good at another, Shanine's good at another, Shaz is good at another. It's all these groups of individuals getting together, right? And then forming groups with other groups who are working with their own strengths as well. This is true empowerment to me. However, Todd, you've got to see the pretentiousness of it all first before you can start letting it go. And it's bloody painful to let go of all the old ideas, emotions, attitudes that formerly have driven all your lifetime up to then. It's just a big sham, mate. It's just a big trap. It's and that's where I'm up to. The biggest thing that helped me was when I was in enough pain to share all the things that I'd done in my life, right, that I was guilty and ashamed of, right. I sat down with somebody that I intuitively felt that I could trust, and I told him everything that I'd done, the things I was deeply, deeply ashamed of and everything else. I wrote them down on a piece of paper, and we spent 4 hours, me offloading this information with this person who'd been through the same process, and it had released him. And you know what, Todd? It took me a long, long time. And I've said this to you before. He said to me at the end of it, and I was shaking and sweating and everything. He said to me, is there anything at all that you're keeping hold of that you're going to take to the grave with you? And I can honestly say, Todd, no. I'd completely gone in and I'd discussed and divulged this information with somebody that I could trust. And I had all this on a piece of paper. And then we knelt down, we said a little prayer to be cleansed. I got up, we went into his back garden, we lit the paper, and we symbolically let it go back to the universe. And Todd, the next morning I got up, I was totally and utterly transformed into a positive person, And I think that that's the step. That's the major step in humility, right? It's humiliating to go through, but that's the thing that turned my life around, and I felt cleansed. And I've said to you before, we're only as sick as our secrets, and people don't want to hear that, because they mightn't consciously be aware that they're holding stuff down, but their unconscious goes, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Yeah.
I hope they don't find out about this, that, and the other. Todd, I've done some really, really terrible things in my former life. That story's now gone. It's not the person that you're talking to now. That's all gone now. You know, I find it really difficult to think all the way back, not because I'm trying to hide from it, but because it's irrelevant to who I am now. You know, the other thing is, I don't try and predict what's coming up. I just have to trust at some level that my soul sees the bigger picture, and he's sending me snippets of information like you got, snippets of information to say, here, Todd, turn left here. Joe, go right. Oh, look, you've just bumped into somebody you haven't seen for ages. Isn't that a coincidence? You know, so I know I'm going on, but people are asking, you know, this is what I did in order to sort of have myself cleaned up. I don't do the cleaning up. It gets done for me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So let me ask you, do you feel, because as the individual goes, so goes the collective, do you feel as time goes on, day by day, moment by moment, that higher self is integrating more fully in your conscious state to where the decisions you make, the choices you make, the actions you take, the words you speak, and so on, are falling into alignment without going back, without the 2 steps up, 1 back type of thing that we've been used to in the past?
Yeah, I think I'm sort of quite well realigned now with that essential purpose, really. I'm sort of resonating most of the time with what I feel is my soul's resonance. And in that state, I don't have to think about what I'm saying. I just open my mouth and just speak from the heart, you know, and it seems to make sense to people. You know, it's I've mentioned this word to you before, it's extemporaneous, meaning I'm not really living from sort of a script here or trying to use all these big words. Whatever's coming out is coming now without a script writer, a script editor, I call it. There's no interference from my head. I'm just talking, as my dad would have said, out at the back of my neck. You know, I'm talking out the back of my neck, you know. But yeah, I feel great, mates. You know, do I feel that I've made it? I don't think there's anything to be made.
No.
I feel like I'm only ever scratching the surface. You know,
it's just further alignment. We got a couple of comments here I want to point out. Diana Renteria, I like the stuff you put out, by the way. I share some of it to Soulogy, and thank you for sharing the Soulogy. It's like so many other people. She says, I can relate to this, Joe. Our DNA did change. And then Valerie Peterman, a very profound statement here. Release all the old emotional crap you are carrying, and you too can have sparkly golden balls, just like Todd and Dr. Joe. Thank you for that comment.
Thank you. I've always wanted to be. Look at that, Todd. They've come back to haunt us.
Thank you, Valerie.
Fine pair. I've told that joke before. I prayed for a fine pair, but if you're not careful with your words, I got a fine pair of mammary glands instead, you know. But there you go. Be careful what you pray for.
Right. Another one, Alinka is asking, has anyone done a soul retrieval? And I actually saw her post in Soulogy yesterday, and I thought to myself, you know, I don't know, you know, to me, can we retrieve? Can we go in and find anything that we consciously seek for? You know, I'm just wondering, as we fade away from the old yogi guru thing into the, you know, to thine own self be true, physician heal thyself kind of mode, the self-empowerment mode. I mean, when we ask the question, are we already on our way to the answer? I guess is kind of another way to put it.
Yeah, I think that things that pop up, and I get mixed up. I mean, I'm not quite sure what soul retrieval means. I think that we're fragmented.
Yeah,
we're misdirected.
I think let's say pieces of the soul retrieval.
Yeah. You know, some people call that fractalization and stuff like that. And I think what happens is, as the central pillar or the central channel opens up, as the kundalini or the energy, as it starts to rise up through the spine, there's a sort of a magnetism, a magnetic effect that draws those fragments or fractals of the soul back together again. I don't think that we can use any cognitive thinking technique to do it. I think that's a trap. I think it's an energetic technique that through things like Qigong and Tai Chi and yoga and breathing, I think that can increase this magnetic current. So that's really the attractive force that reunifies all these fragments and makes us a whole soul again.
Well,
And,
there may be I agree with you, but and I think in like working with Morgan and even utilizing like some of the tools, like one of the tools she has is these O cards, which are strictly images and a word, you know, and I don't want to get into it, but what they do is they remember you were talking about earlier about you know, allowing that stuff to come in rather than creating it here. They pop in. And I noticed, like for me, once I started getting into the work, that these situations or past events where I gave up soul fragments would pop in my head. And as they popped in my head, I guess in one sense, my psyche was ready for it at that point because of the work I'd done or whatever openings were created. That's as they came is when I would retrieve them, you know, as they popped into my head, which I don't know what, you know, I can't say, you know, beyond doubt, you know, what precipitated that or what caused that. But I think, you know, it's again, it's kind of a, we sometimes when we go seeking something really, really hard, sometimes you got to step back and breathe a little bit and allow it to come in, because the desire and the awareness of something being present seems to be a really big step in our expansions.
Well, I think you can go looking for trouble. You know, I think the more that you seek in a sort of egocentric way, the more trouble you'll find, really. So, you know, it's, in my view, it's to try and keep a clean slate throughout the day. And anything that pops in then, it comes from, you know, the deeper purpose. And so you can pay attention to that then. But if you're always distracted by external things, you miss the messages that are coming through. That's my experience. So more and more, my mind is relatively free of stuff, you know. It's the monkey mind and all that chitter chatter. It seems to be going away more and more. And I spend long periods of time when there's just no thoughts. There's just this pleasant feeling coming through, you know. And I don't know what enlightenment is, Todd. I mean, I've had those feelings of the peace that passeth all understanding. I've had that. I've had the secrets to the universe. I've seen that. I've seen it in ciphers. I've seen it. I've felt the feeling and all that, you know. But I don't know, mate. You know, I got to a point where I went from being a know-all-knows, you know, a knowledgeable idiot who thought he knew lots of stuff. And then I went to somebody who hasn't got a clue anymore now. I just wake up and I just sort of, I wait to see what happens. Just deal with facts as they present themselves, you know. So to me, is I say to people, just do what emerges next. Oh yes, but what about? Never mind that. Oh yes, but what about? Just do what comes up next. Well, where's it coming from? And then I think, piss off, go on, come back when you're ready, you know.
Well, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier, you know, growing up. You know, Morgan told me one time that she said, I never heard the word ascension. And, you know, her higher self always spoke to her in terms of, it's not about ascension, it's about growing up. And along the lines of what you were talking about earlier. And here's another comment on that note from Karen D'Souza. Thank you, Karen. She says, well, speaking things into being doesn't always work. That's why people can repeat the I ams daily multiple times a day and not really make any difference, though saying positive things to oneself. It's not a bad concept. And anybody, you know, I know in my early years, I studied, what was that called? Like Napoleon Hill and W. Clement Stone. Whatever they call that. But they used a lot of the positive affirmations. But this goes back to the deprogramming, reprogramming. Whether we reprogram or not, or wherever we split hairs there a while ago, doesn't really matter. The whole point is, it's obvious to us now at this point on the trip, we've got to deprogram. And deprogram, it may not be the right word, but we've at least got to go in and access those things that we have, as David Manning said on the last show, sealed away. You know, we put these seals up so we don't remember them. And anyone who's had any traumas, you know, specifically for the most part, as we were talking about the root earlier in the sexual energy suppression, molestation. You know, people disassociate, they put up a seal, they don't remember, and then of course at some point in time it comes back to visit them. But yeah, I think it's a very important thing. We can't just, to me, the positive affirmation path, yes, I think she's right. It does some good, but there's also kind of like that whole fluffy love and light thing that we used to see a lot of in the light worker circles, that wasn't really looking at the shadows. Oh, that just doesn't exist. To me, that's just an energetic disassociation. We have to meet the shadow, and it's not a bad thing.
But I know, Todd, that we have to meet our beast. You're right. And as I've said to you before, true beauty, in my view and my experience, comes from the belly of the beast.
Yeah.
And I used to get this, and I have this black dragon thing with me that comes, I don't generate it. It's sitting with me now, right? It's at the back here, right at the back of me. And it's almost as if its tail goes up through my roots, through my perineum, up through my sacral chakra, right? And then it goes up through my spine then and out through the top of my head like a Roman candle, you know. And it's almost like that's the empowerment that comes in. Yeah. And I'm sure that when I drank and took all sorts of other substances, I sort of released that, but before time. And I think what's happened is I've been taken back to the beginning and shown how to naturally restore all the vibrations correctly at the chakras. And when all the chakras are vibrating at the correct resonance for that particular moment, I think we get this DMT effect, you know, the dimethyltryptamine effect. Yeah. And the spirit molecule then opens up the pineal gland, which opens us up then to the secrets of the universe. And if you can get to that inner pharmacy through breathing, through correct nutrition and stuff. Now, when I say correct nutrition, we've talked about this. I eat what I feel my soul wants me to eat, right? Not what anything outside of me tells me. So sometimes it might be go and have a strong coffee, Joe. And sometimes it might be go and drink a liter of water, Joe. So I try and go with my taste. I try and allow soul to influence my taste buds. And then I try and work out what is it you want, much in the same way that the developing fetus sends images and tastes and feelings to the mum to say, I want some coal, I want some ice cream, I want some chocolate, you know, because these are more powerful forces than my ego and intellectual self that's been conditioned by other people's ideas on how I should live, you know. So it's about being totally and utterly honest with thyself. What do you think? I sound like I'm always on one when I come on your show, you know, but
I'm trying to figure out. I have two questions before we get out of here. No, I think it's great, man. I love talking to you. That's why we do it. What does that say? Bah humbug? Because it's backwards.
Yes, it does.
Okay, I thought it said something. Okay, I got you. And the
what
second
did you
thing
think it said, Todd?
I can't repeat it.
Okay. Don't forget, I'm telepathic.
Well, I don't want to even go there. But I saw these series of pictures that you put up a week ago where you were giving a presentation, and they had a shot of you from, it looked like the upper seats, and you were on stage making these Tai Chi-esque type moves, and one of them seemed to be like that. I was just wondering if you could just revisit that part of the presentation, explain to us what those pictures were saying.
Yes, it's the Tai Chi, it's the great ultimate that flows through all of us. It's the essential self. It's the self that can't be described because it's beyond words, right? And sometimes when people are trying to pressurize you, there's a move, and it's basically a very flowing move, and it's basically to say no, it's to stop the energy. So that's the first one, stop, right? Now, if they don't really pay attention to that, then you do a more flamboyant move then. And you have to generate the energy then. And then you can go like this then. This is the second stage. And then you can say to them, I've told you once. And then if they really don't pay attention, then you really have to call in all the etheric forces of the universe. And you say, look, I've told you twice, right? You've only got one more chance. And then if they don't listen to that, you can bring in all the iron fist techniques and all that, and you just knock them out and you punch them with love. Just punch them with love, because sometimes you've got to save them from themselves. It's like people who are drowning, Todd. Sometimes you have to knock them out to draw them to the shore, otherwise they'll drag you down with them, you see. And so there's a sort of underlying symbology in all that is, don't mess with Dr. Joe.
There you go. And the
Hope.
last bit of advice I wish you could give us is, as our Kundalini continues to increase in its power and strength in our physical bodies, how do we deal with the consequences of that?
Just open your heart, because what it's going to do, Todd, is it's going to open your heart more and more.
Yeah.
So you allow your Kundalini to come through the heart, open the gates of your heart, and just allow it to pour out, and everything in your life will change. You won't need to ask anybody else for advice, because you'll be guided from your heart of hearts. And as you know, Todd, your heart of hearts is called your soul, and we are soulmates.
That's
we
right.
Are soul.
I am soul, you are soul. Man, I look forward to the next time, as always. I love getting together with you. Have a happy holidays, and behave yourself to the best of your abilities. And congratulations on your new home, and all blessings to you and your wife. And thanks for coming in again.
Thanks very much, mate. Love to Morgan.
All right. Take care. Thank you, everybody.